Today, I'm actually going to be reading out a passage of Anonymous Conservative's book on RK selection, how it applies to politics. Biologists have long recognized that two different psychologies exist in nature. These two psychologies each guide the organisms which hold them to pursue a behavioral strategy which will be most likely to yield effective survival and reproduction. They are referred to as reproductive strategies, but they are really deeply imbued psychologies. They frame how an organism views the world, how it views its peers, and how it behaves as it moves through life. The study of these psychologies is often described using the shorthand RK selection theory. Both the R strategy and the K strategy, as they are referred to within the field, are psychologies which yield behavior that is custom-tailored to a specific environment. In humans, as in nature, the R psychology is primarily an adaptation to the presence of copious resources. This is a condition which reduces the advantages of producing fit offspring, in turn favoring raw numerical reproduction. By contrast, the K psychology is an adaptation to a relative scarcity of resources. This produces an increased selective pressure, favoring the survival of more advanced and fit specimens. It also reduces the advantages of producing copious numbers of less fit offspring. Although the presence or absence of resources may vary within a population, over the short term, over the long term, these two environmental conditions will usually accompany either the presence or absence of a constant, high mortality, most frequently predation. Predation lowers population numbers and prevents overcrowding, thereby increasing the per capita resources available to each individual. This prevents the onset of a resource shortage due to overpopulation. It is for this reason that the R strategy, which is the evolutionary origin of liberalism, is most often seen in nature within prey species, while the K strategy, which underlies conservatism, is most often seen in species which are not preyed upon. This is in fact the biological underpinning of the oft-heard maxim, conservatives think like lions, liberals think like lambs. Lions are a K-selected species which exists sans predation. As a result, each new lion must compete with its peers to acquire a share of the limited resources available to the population. As a result, lions evolved to exhibit a K-type competitive, aggressive psychology to match this. Sheep, by contrast, are a more R-selected prey species, surrounded by fields of grass they will rarely, if ever, fully consume. This is reflected in their less belligerent, more pacifistic, more freely promiscuous nature. One species exhibits a psychology which is belligerent, competitive, and sexually restricted so as to compete for limited resources. The other exists as an exact opposite, simply trying to turn resources into offspring as quickly as possible, regardless of the fitness. Each is perfectly designed to compete with peers in their respective environment. The R strategy entails 5 main psychological traits. Each trait is designed to help an organism outcompete its peers in the R-selected environment of free resource availability. This psychology exhibits a psychological aversion to both competition with peers and the competitive environment. It also exhibits a tolerance for or embrace of promiscuity, low investment single parenting, and early onset sexual behavior among offspring. It will also tend not to exhibit any group-centric urges, such as loyalty to in-group or hostility to out-group. Of these 5 traits, competition aversion, promiscuity, single parenting, early onset sexuality, and aversion to group centrism/ethnocentrism, political leftists exhibit a tolerance of or an embrace of all 5. Indeed, as we will show, these 5 urges explain the entire liberal platform of issue positions. Liberalism seeks to quash competitions between men, from capitalism to war to citizens killing criminal attackers with privately owned firearms. Liberalism also adopts a lax attitude toward rampant promiscuity, if it is not actively embracing it. Liberals tend to support single parenting, such as was seen in the debate over the TV show Murphy Brown's glorification of single motherhood. Liberalism exhibits a tolerance for, or an embrace of, ever earlier sexual education for children, as well as an ever more sexualized media environment to which children are exposed. Liberals tend to reject ethnocentrism and view any tendency toward a pack mentality as an odd and foolish evolutionary throwback. On top of all of this, at the heart of most liberal policy is a fundamental perception that resources exist in limitless quantities and that any shortage is not inherent to the finite nature of the world. Rather, any shortage must be due to some specific individual's greed, altering the world's natural state of plenty, which would otherwise be able to easily provision everyone with a comfortably high level of resources. This is a psychology designed to avoid danger and focus the individual on reproducing as fast as possible. In our ancient evolutionary environment, absent birth control and abortion, this would produce large number of offspring beginning early in life, and it would perfectly adapt to conditions of free resource availability. The K strategy entails an embrace of 5 opposite psychological traits. The K selection favors an aggressive embrace of competition and the competitive environment, where some individuals succeed and others fail, based on their inherent abilities and merits. It tends to reject promiscuity in favor of sexual selectivity and monogamy, and it will strongly favor high investment two-parent offspring rearing. The K strategy also favors delaying sexual activity among offspring until later in life when maximally fit. Finally, in its most evolved form, K selection will tend to imbue individuals with a fierce loyalty to their in-group to facilitate success in group competitions. Danger, shortage, and conflict are the evolutionary origins of a pack mentality, and they are ever present in the extreme K-selected environment. Clearly, conservatives favor competition, from capitalism to war to armed citizens fighting off criminals with personally owned firearms. Conservatives accept that such competitions will produce disparate outcomes, which will be based on inherent ability and effort. Conservatives favor a culture of monogamy over promiscuity, and they tend to desire a culture which favors high investment two-parent child rearing, as evidenced by the growing debate over family values within our culture. Conservatives also tend to want to see children protected from sexually stimulating themes or sexual education until later in life, so they will be more likely to delay the onset of sexual activity until they're mature. Of course, conservatives have always viewed liberals as exhibiting diminished loyalty to their nation and its people, because to a conservative, patriotism and support for one's own is a vital moral quality in peers, and its expression can never be too exaggerated. Again, this is a psychology designed to house one's genes in carefully chosen, highly fit competitive machines. It is perfectly adapted to confront conditions of resource limitation, where one's only means of acquiring resources is to be better at competition than your peers and do whatever it takes not to be the individual who failed to succeed. Why do the R and K reproductive strategies exist? How does each strategy offer advantage to the individual who exhibits it? Suppose you have a field and it produces enough grass to support 100 R-selected rabbits. A group of owls moves in, however, and keeps the rabbit population at only 20 rabbits in a field which produces enough food to support 100. Now, this environment offers specific advantages and disadvantages to each rabbit. The owls will shorten each rabbit's average lifespan. As a result, Darwinian selection will favor rabbits which reproduce fast and early. If a rabbit waits to mate, it will be eaten, and that sexually procrastinating trait will be culled. As a result, those rabbits that produce the next generation will have no compunction about mating as early as possible. In this environment, teenagers and children, mating is simply normal, as anyone who feels otherwise is eaten prior to reproducing. Mating earlier also offers a numerical advantage in offspring production, which is advantageous when the competition is about producing as many offspring as possible. Competition's risks will serve no purpose, since each rabbit already has vastly more food than it could eat. Those who compete will waste time and energy fighting for something which is already freely available elsewhere. Those who fight will risk injury and death, while those who do not fight will enjoy the same freely available food, absent any risk, simply by fleeing to another green pasture. The fighters and competitors will produce fewer offspring than those who avoid competition's risk and focus all of their time solely on reproducing. As a result, the competitive will find themselves numerically outproduced by the more prolific individuals who avoided conflict and competition. Under our selection, monogamy is disadvantageous, since to impregnate only one mate and then see few offspring you have with her eaten is to see yourself fail in Darwinian terms. Monogamy will also limit the total numbers of offspring produced, as a single female can only produce so many young. Thus, in this environment, one is best served by producing as many offspring as possible, by as many mates as possible, beginning as early as possible. In that way, it becomes likely, statistically, that some of your numerous children will survive to reproduce. Since, under conditions of our selection, these are the traits Darwin rewards, these are the traits which will emerge within a species placed within an R-selecting environment. Since producing high numbers of offspring is the goal, it is also advantageous not to waste too much time on rearing any one offspring. The goal in our selection is mass production, as early and often as possible. Those who produce more offspring outcompete those who do not. As a result, high investment parenting for extended periods will give way to investing as little as possible in each offspring's rearing, so one may dedicate oneself to the act of reproduction. This will allow the individual to most effectively take advantage of the surplus resources available by producing as many offspring as possible. Since resources are freely available and aggression and competition are rare, offspring do not require much education or protection anyway, and they may be turned out of home relatively early to fend for themselves. Males will of course abandon females with offspring so as to pursue their highly promiscuous mating strategy. Here too you will notice, since there is no competition, there is no need to ally with anyone else to compete for resources. As a result, these rabbits will not evolve any group-centric urges or emotional connection to their peers. Indeed, the very notion of in-group or out-group would be puzzling to them, if you could communicate the concept. As a result of all this, in this environment, a population will evolve to avoid conflict and competition, mate with as many partners as possible, mate early, and not invest highly in any one child. The emphasis, as so many biology textbooks will assert, is to produce quantity over quality when producing offspring in an R-selective environment. Now suppose we zoom out from the field and zoom into a nearby forest. There are several packs of K-selected wolves exist in harmonious balance with a deer herd. Once these wolves reproduce, there will not be enough food to support the entire population of wolves, so some wolves will die due to starvation. This creates a different selective pressure entirely. Here, to survive, a wolf must aggressively compete with his peers for a share of limited food available. Those who avoid conflict and competition in hopes of stumbling on non-existent food elsewhere will die from starvation. The wolves who survive will be those who go after any food they see, even if they have to try and take it from another wolf by force or violence. Thus, such a K-type psychology will evolve to exhibit a more aggressive, competitive nature, more accepting of violence, as well as inevitable disparities in competitive outcomes between individuals. Of course, a wolf's success, in Darwinian terms, will revolve not just about surviving and mating, but also around producing offspring who survive and reproduce themselves. From a Darwinian perspective, if a parent survives and mates, but all of their offspring die due to competitive failure, the parent might as well not have bothered reproducing at all. As a result, K-selected wolves will evolve a psychology designed to invest heavily in a few highly competitive offspring. This will produce a small number of offspring that are likely to outcompete their peers rather than a larger number of lower quality, competitively incompetent offspring. Those wolves who mate randomly and often with any mate they happen across will see their numerous haphazardly produced offspring killed off by the fitter offspring of those parents who carefully sought the fittest mate possible and then competitively monopolized their mate's genetic fitness through monogamy. As a result, this K trait of careful mate selection and competitive monopolization would emerge spontaneously as Darwin works his magic. Young wolves will evolve to wait before entering the competition for a mate so as to make sure they are as competitive as possible and are not simply killed by their older competition due to their immaturity. Parents will also evolve to discourage such early sexual precociousness in their young, so their young will be maximally mature and maximally attractive to highly fit mates when pursuing their own mate. Likewise, parents will evolve toward high investment two-parent or even pack rearing so as to better protect their offspring until they are ready to compete and to carefully prepare them for the rigorous competition with peers which awaits them. Intense K selection often evolves into groups of individuals competing with other groups, since this is a more effective way to acquire limited resources than working alone. As a result, K-type organisms will tend to evolve into groups of individuals who exhibit pro-social traits, such as loyalty to in-group and disregard for out-group interests. This is why K-selection produces packs of wolves, herds of elephants, pods of dolphins, and prides of lions, all of whom care deeply for each other, while mice, antelope, deer, rabbits, and other R-selected species will not exhibit any sadness should one of their ranks fall prey to a predator. Since rabbits exist at the bottom of the food pyramid in nature and are preyed upon fairly consistently by a wide range of predators from owls to hawks to foxes, rabbits never truly experience the K-selected environment for any extended period. As a result of eons of fairly consistent R-selection pressures, they express a consistently R-type psychology throughout their species. Other species which have existed for long periods under conditions of limited resources will be highly K-selected in their psychology and behavior. Still, other species can exhibit a mix of R and K-type psychologies due to a variety of unique environmental conditions, among them having a history of living in varying environments with periodic resource abundances and resource shortages. These are the two environments that conservatives and liberals are perfectly adapted to function within. Of course, the R-type trait can never truly succeed. Should the R-type individuals ever gain full control over the populace, their mechanisms of control require a constant supply of the fuel of resources produced by the very populace they oppress. In removing the reward for effort and ability, such an R-type government will inevitably diminish its people's productive output and thereby starve itself of the very currency it requires to operate and oppress. At that very moment, proliferative R-parasites will be multiplying without bound, attempting to consume ever greater amounts of resources that are no longer being produced. As the power to control recedes, the populace will increasingly abide by its competitive nature. As we have seen, such a mechanism will not tend towards a steady homeostasis where R and K-type natures exist in a perpetually harmonious balance, but rather will careen wildly between periods of oppressed shortages and freedom-fueled abundance, When the highs come, they will be wonderful, but within each will lay the R-selected seed of overtly abundant resources. Just as surely as day follows night, that seed will inexorably grow alongside the R-type subset of a population until stability has given way to governmental collapse and abundance and plenty becomes shortage, inefficiency, and desperation. Personally, it is my opinion that the least immoral path is to honor each man's freedom, limit government intervention, and let each man bear the burden of responsibility for himself and his future.